So we're here today with Professor Bill Lazonick, who's a professor at the University of Massachusetts at Lowell, and also one of our inaugural grantees for a project titled The Stock Market and Innovative Enterprise. I've read your grant, Bill, and wow, it really covers a lot of ground there. But it seems to me that the central part of this is two ideas. That innovation is the most important sort of driver of economic welfare and growth, and that the innovative enterprise is key to that. Do I got that more or less right?
Yeah, and let me just take it a step beyond that.
Okay.
That innovation tends to be a collective and cumulative process. So that involves a lot of people. It often involves the government. In fact, almost any high-tech industry you want to name in the United States or anywhere else that is successful is because the government is invested in the knowledge base, the basic infrastructure that people who are entrepreneurs or companies can use. Okay, you wouldn't have a biotech industry or a life sciences industry or pharmaceutical industry without that spending. And it's much more than has been done anywhere else in the world. And this goes back to the railroads, the government funded the land-grant college system, aviation, computers, the internet, biotechnology. The government's always there. Then people come in and say, okay, let's develop these technologies and sell them on the market. This is something you have to hire people, you have to get money, it takes lots of time, depends on the industry, how long it takes. In biotech, actually, it can take 10 to 20 years and cost $2 to $4 billion to develop a drug with no certainty of success.
Well, that's an interesting connection to another emphasis that we have here at INET, which is on the importance of Knightian uncertainty, this really not just risk, but the fact that the future is really unknown. And what you're emphasizing is that the future is created, okay, by people, by ideas, by firms, by organizations.
Right. It's some people who have particular knowledge of particular industries, who have experience through having been in careers in a particular industry and in particular times and places, who then say, well, I know something about this. If I can convince someone to put up the money, I can put together a group of people and we can solve this problem. But even then there's uncertainty because someone might be able to solve the problem before you. So even if you solve the problem, someone might do it better. Even if you solve the problem, there might not be the markets there to absorb it. So I argue actually that there's three types of uncertainty: technological, market, competitive uncertainty that you have to face. Okay, so you have to then have some people, but they're not just anybody. There are people who have experience in the industry, who have really unique insights.
This is about managing uncertainty.
Yeah, and this is and
uncertainty work for
because
you.
Ultimately, if you're successful, you overcome uncertainty. You know, what seemed totally improbable, uncertain before, you now 10 years later, 5 years later, whatever it is, you're successful. Somehow you overcame this. Well, this is not luck. It's because you made investments, you hired the right people, you integrated those people into an organization, and you got the finance, which is a really difficult thing, to be committed to something that's totally uncertain, at least.
Yeah, now you raise the finance. So that's really the focus of your research, as far as I understand, is you're emphasizing that innovation requires certain kinds of conditions, and the stock market has its own kind of conditions, and these aren't exactly aligned.
This really needs to be understood, how this works. And the secret of good venture capital in the United States, that is people who really understand the nature of the industries they're in and the nature of the process involved, is that these are not just people who provide finance. These are people who understand strategy, organization as well. They understand the market and technological and competitive conditions of the industries that are involved. And so I've looked, for example, in the case of Silicon Valley, at the rise of venture capital in great detail. The stock market was actually not that important in the operation
for raising
companies.
Cash.
The only time that it had been important was in the late 1920s, when you had the speculative boom, and companies sold stock to pay off debt and to bolster the corporate treasury. So in fact, the companies were using the speculators against them. Now, just to give a contrast to see where I'm going on this, in the late 90s, companies bought stock at these high prices to try to boost their stock prices. Their executives, who now had stock options, all kinds of stock-based pay, they're the ones who sold stock and made lots of money for themselves. Okay, so what I argue is that the stock market, when it does become important, in the innovative enterprise, it actually ultimately undermines innovation. It becomes something where the market is really driving the organizations rather than organizations driving the market. And that's actually a bigger theme, that we need a theory of how organizations are successful, particularly business organizations, in developing innovation.
So this central role of innovation, which seems like it's been central to really all of your research for the last 20, 30 years. Where does this come from in your life, in your education?
Okay, partly it came from learning a lot of neoclassical economics. I did a master's degree at London School of Economics when Harry Johnson was the guru there. And what I really liked about that is that they taught neoclassical economics, Chicago style, and they really believed it. Mm-hmm. Then I came to Harvard and to do a PhD in 1970. There were a lot of radical economists around there, so people were questioning economics. And for some reason, my view was that there was something missing in terms of understanding a central institution in the economy, and that is the corporation. And at that time, where that had been brought home to me was two people, Galbraith, reading The New Industrial State, which came out in 1967. I read shortly after that, I think while I was a student at LSE. And also while I was a student at LSE, I read probably even more important book, Edith Penrose's Theory of the Growth of the Firm, which was written in 1959. One of the few books, and the few books around still to this day, coming from an economist, which really saw the business enterprise as an organization of people that was integrated through collective activity to generate results that hadn't been there before.
Yeah. Now that's interesting. So you found this life project, intellectual project, but then I remember that you started life as an economic historian.
What it was is that in looking for another theory, first of all, I started saying, hey, Karl Marx wrote about the Industrial Revolution in Britain, and he also believed that theory was related to history. So I was doing that from a point of view of looking for an alternative theory. Now, I won't go into any length, but I found Marx was very useful, but there was some serious problems with the way Marx interpreted 19th century Britain. At the same time, I then got into the issue that Britain, by the 20th century, had declined. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of neoclassical economists led by then Donald, now Deirdre McCloskey, who were writing on this subject, so that I ended up getting into debate with them. That actually made me a kind of economic historian, but by that time I was already an associate professor at Harvard, so it wasn't that early in my career that I was went and found these economic historians, many of whom could relate to the work that I was doing. Very soon after that, almost at the same time, I also discovered business history, and particularly Alfred Chandler. Who I worked with very, very closely during the 1980s and the 1990s. The Visible Hand had a huge impact on me. He had written Strategy and Structure in 1962. The Visible Hand, the subtitles of Managerial Revolution in American Business, when I read that, it just pulled everything together because two reasons. One, the managerial revolution that he's talking about, it was done by 1920. So this wasn't something that just happened. This is something that had happened at that point 60, 70 years ago. All the companies, and now some of them are gone, that we knew about had their origins back then. They were run by managers, not by owners. They were run by people who were professionals, who were employees, who rose up through the organization. You basically had, in business enterprises, the norm of a career with one company, and this was for millions and millions of people who were able then to build their human capital working for particular firms. And these firms dominated the world economy, at least up to that time. So this was a success, and you also see that in this period, if you look at some of the more macroeconomic indicators, this was a period where you're trending toward more equality in the U.S. economy. And
income distribution,
and I would argue the large corporation, the stability of employment, the career with one company, that was what was providing this. Also, blue-collar workers got in on this through unions, because what the unions won coming out of the 1930s, which then became very important in these companies, was seniority. So although they were treated differently than managers, nevertheless you had this stability. At least that was up to the 1970s. And the stock market, what it did is it just got the shareholders out of there. Then, if there was a managerial revolution, there was another revolution, but it really wasn't in the 1980s and beyond a revolution of shareholders. It was managers saying that we have to create value for shareholders, and we have this ideology that comes in the early 1980s, which totally transforms the way in which corporations think about employing people, about investing, and which, to make a long story short, after 30 years, is doing tremendous, tremendous damage to the U.S. economy.
Well, now you hit on yet another INET theme, this issue of inequality that we're very interested in learning more. We really look forward to hearing more of the results of your research that seems to bring together so many different themes. Thank you for joining our community, and we look forward to the results.
Okay, good, thanks.